Well, we are here in Kourou Mission Center. Everything is going well. We are just a few minutes away from Liftoff, and we are here with all of our partners here on the space base, CNES, our clients, the CNES, the Ministry of the Armed Forces, the Space Command Unit, our partners and manufacturers, Airbus and Thales. So we're all here together, very focused indeed for this mission that's about to lift off.
We will mention in passing that this is the third Arianespace mission for December 2020, which is a great schedule of activity. But right away, Stéphane, can you tell us more about tonight's launch for the CSO program?
Yes, we are going to be delivering this mission for the benefit of the Optical Space Component Program. This is the second such satellite to be launched as part of this program, CSO-2. And the Soyuz launcher will be the launcher lifting off tonight. This is a three-stage launcher. After 9 minutes, this third stage will separate. Then the frigate will take over. And after 60 minutes, we'll have separations with the CSO-2 satellite being put into orbit. Beautiful mission. Looking forward to that.
Thank you, Stéphane. Thank you for all this. And we'll let you go back to your teams, back to work at the control center in Jupiter. Goodbye and see you later.
So
back here in Paris, it's quite simple. We have a TV set in connection to Kourou in Guiana. We are not wearing masks. Neither I nor the two Arianespace experts, because it's a gigantic table, over 3 meters long, and as we are alone on this TV set, we respect the distance, but we apply otherwise strictly all the sanitary instructions in force. At the control center, as you could see behind the fishbowl, all the people in charge are at work, but here, at less or just 10 minutes away from H0, we will discuss a few things. First of all, we can say that a major step will be the launch of the synchronized sequence, a sequence that starts traditionally at H0 minus 10 minutes in the whole countdown sequence, and from this moment onwards, it's a real thing that starts. We will mention the fact that here we can say that, as I said in the introduction, December was a very busy month. 3 launches for Arianespace. It's quite seldom the case, isn't it?
It is indeed. Soyuz has been particularly busy since the end of 2020. And with the first launch from Kourou, the start of December for another Earth observation satellites. Then we went to Vostochny in Russia for the launch of 36 satellites for the benefit of OneWeb constellation. Then we are back in Kourou. And temperature, generally speaking, we're talking plus 30 degrees Celsius in Vostochny. That's minus 30 degrees Celsius. So we are back tonight to Kourou for the launch of this CSO-2 satellite for the benefit of CNES and DGA.
So indeed, a heavy schedule. The synchronized sequence has already started. We are at H0 minus 9 minutes and 20-ish seconds. We will right away mention, Remy, hear about the overview of tonight's mission. You will, in a nutshell, give us a summary in 1.5 minutes of tonight's mission.
Right, so after liftoff, we'll have the start of the atmospheric phase. The 4 lateral boosters will be in action for 2 minutes. Then 4 minutes later, we'll have jettisoning of fairing, which will mark the end of this atmospheric flight. Then we'll have separation of central core, and Block I, as the Russians say, will take over. This will take the frigate and satellite on suborbital orbit, with separation with frigate taking over the rest of the mission, with a first burn of about 8-9 minutes so as to place the frigate and satellite into orbits, and then a second burn very short indeed, 29 seconds to circularize the orbit, and leading to an altitude of 480 kilometers. And we'll have separations with the satellite. Then we'll have a second coasting phase, quite a long one, about 37 minutes. And ending with a really tiny frigate burn, which aims at a collision avoidance between the satellite and frigate. It will be very short indeed, very brief, about for 85 seconds. Then we'll have an additional coasting phase with the fourth frigate burn, and which purpose is to deorbit the stage so that it re-enters the atmosphere and disintegrate by re-entering atmosphere.
Thank you. Very informative explanations. Raphael, we were talking about the coming mission, but this morning it started very early, all the operations at -9 hours.
Yes, the final chronology military operation started at H-9 hours, 5 hours prior to liftoff. We carried out a technical check and a weather check so as to authorize the fueling of tanks, fueling operations, so of the three-stage with a mix of kerosene and liquid oxygen. Then an hour and 35 minutes, this marks the end of fueling operations, and we'll start the synchronized sequence. And at H-10, 20 minutes later, we'll remove the mobile gantry. And this will take us to 5 minutes prior to liftoff. This is where we will place the launcher into key on start, key on ignition position. This will allow to go ahead with the liftoff of the launcher.
The startup key is the Kourou start key. The mythical key Soyuz launcher that has over 1,200 launches under the belt. And talking about this, we will talk now about the launcher preparation campaign and the satellite. To what are the major milestones of a launch campaign?
Yes. Well, it started with the launcher coming to Guiana, generally speaking, by ship. It is then assembled into the MIC, and then we integrate horizontally those 4 lateral blocks, the 4 boosters, and this will be assembled around the central core, referred to as Block I by the Russians. Then we'll have the 3-stage between I and E, and then we'll install the Block I above Block A. And then parallel to that, the satellite will be shipped by air into Guiana. It will be transferred to its assembly building. The satellite will be transferred and assembled, integrated into its adapter. Then the fairing will come in and will be integrated, will attach onto its to the satellite, the frigate, the adapter. In parallel to that, the 3-stage launcher Soyuz will be taken out of the assembly building, will be taken and will be erected from horizontal position to vertical position, will be placed on its launch pad, and then the gantry, the mobile gantry, will come and cover up the launch vehicle. And the final composite, the upper composite, will be hoisted, will be erected above the 3-stage assembly, and it will be connected. The umbilical will be connected, and from that point, the launcher is ready for launch, ready for liftoff. It is well set on its mobile gantry, and the gantry has been removed for some time now.
1 hour and 10 minutes approximately. A marvelous Soyuz launch vehicle. It's true, it's very vintage looking, beautiful colors, white, grey, and amber, and bright red inside the nozzles. It's very recognizable. Let's talk about the final chronology, Raphael. We've entered the 5 minutes now.
So we are into the final 5 minutes, so we've switched to ground to onboard power supply, so 2 minutes and 24 seconds prior to liftoff. We'll pressurize the tanks, we'll check the umbilical cords, and 40 seconds before liftoff, we'll switch the three-stage from ground to onboard power. And so as for the launcher to be autonomous in terms of power supply, and then we'll remove the upper mast and the lower mast. And then what's specific about the Soyuz is that 16 seconds before liftoff, we'll see the ignition of the 4 lateral boosters and the central core. And this will ignite 16 seconds before liftoff, before actual liftoff of the launch vehicle. And then so we ramp up the thrust. We'll have a preliminary thrust and intermediate thrust, taking us to 70% of the total thrust, and then the full thrust, the final thrust, will allow the launcher to lift off.
As you will see in a few moments on your screens, you spoke about the KM and ZKM arms. We see them pulling away from the launch vehicle, which is a sign of an imminent liftoff. What are the characteristics of the engines?
Yes, well, liftoff is always a critical moment in this, because the thrust switched from nil to full thrust within seconds, with intermediate thrust, and the so this is quite a significant stability period. Now, the 4 boosters surround block A, and they will provide 400 tons of thrust, and will lift 310 tons of launcher to the sky. Now, these lateral boosters beyond the engine have an unchanged design since the 50s, and what's specific about them is that the thrust this lateral blocks is greater than that of block A, which is only 80 tons, whilst each of these 4 boosters delivers a thrust of 85 tons. Quite an interesting concept of separations of these 4 boosters, and they will massively contribute to the atmospheric flight phase. They account for 85% of the total mass of the launch vehicle, and satellite only accounts for 1% of the total launcher mass.
It's true, that's usually the case in the space sector. So liftoff in 1 minute. So what are your feelings just now?
As ever, tremendous focus right now, and every launch is a technical and collective launch that is quite unique.
It's always unique. Yeah.
This is the most tense moment in the chronology. Liftoff is really a very special moment indeed.
So we are here, Paris and Kourou, witnessing this liftoff. We see the first mast pulling away from the launch vehicle. We will now remain silent during the liftoff, and we'll be back in a few moments.
Largage du VKM, allumage du triétage. À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top, décollage.
Nos caméras arrivent encore à suivre Soyuz.
So you see our cameras are still tracking the Soyuz launcher beyond the clouds canopy with its engines. So can we describe in detail this atmospheric phase of the launch?
Yes, the atmospheric flight sequence is flight phase is said to be quite set. The objective is really to guarantee the structural resilience of the launcher with a nil angle of attack here, nil inclination, and the monitoring of this whole flight is authorized and made possible thanks to a very important operation, which is that of CDI. This is the real-time visual control, and these controls that checks that the flight is nominal, that is as expected, and allows to tell the clients and confirm to the clients that the flight has gone as planned. So data comes via the downward range stations spread all over the world, and will be and these sensors
announce the separation of the boosters. It's still there on the screen, and this is happening right in front of your eyes. We've just seen the separation of the 4 boosters. So Soyuz was 300 tons heavy, and in a matter of 2 minutes it lost over half of its weight. It's totally nominal, is that according to plan.
Confirmation of separation of lateral boosters.
So Remy is connected to the CVI, so throughout the video transmission you will be relaying any confirmation or milestones announced by the CVI. A few words about what is at the top of the launcher, that is the fairing.
To clarify that we don't always see these separations so just as clearly as we've just seen.
It's incredible. It's still visible at 2 minutes 45 after the launch liftoff.
Any the fairing is there is designed to protect the satellite from air frictions in the atmospheric phase, and when we reach the limit of the atmosphere, and when we reach space, we no longer need a structure to protect the satellite, so we'll shed we'll separate the fairing, shedding weight in the process, dead weight. We don't need for the next part of the mission.
And as we fly into the sky, we remove the dead weights.
Absolutely, this is a very principle of the launch operations, and this is quite an essential sequence, because can you imagine if the fairing doesn't work properly, then and when we want to separate the satellite, I think we would have a bit of a problem.
Quite so. Separation of the fairing is a very important event with the 2 half fairings splitting apart. We could talk more about the specificity of this fairing as the SPS special tropical.
Absolutely, this fairing has been developed in cooperation with Russia in the framework of Soyuz cooperation in French Guiana, and the objective was to have an equivalent volume to that of under the Ariane 4 fairing. So that's 11 meters in height, 4 meters in diameters in terms of this fairing. That we can say is the manufacturer of these fairings. And here, this is a simulation. Let us point this out, but we need to wait for confirmation.
And as you just said, it's important, separation of the fairing.
As Raphael indicated, this is a very important stage in this process.
Just pointed out, the images we see, the 3D images you have on your screens are according to the flight program, and we've just seen the extinction of the lower stage and the hot separation, that is the upper engine has switched on, and Soyuz is continuing on its way. It's the hot separation, as we call it.
Confirmation of separation of Block A.
So it's a sun-synchronous orbit. We went straight towards the north with Soyuz. During these, it's like the ball of yarn that runs regularly above the north and the south pole.
This is a low orbit, a circular orbit between 400 and 900 kilometers in altitude. It is very often used by Earth's observation satellite, and what's unique about it is that satellites will fly over a specific spot in the air of Paris, let's say every day at 2 p.m. It's very handy because you can take pictures at a given location, same conditions of sunlight, and you can compare and contrast images one after the other. And this is also why we're aiming at a defined moment on the liftoff, because it is like a on-spot locations, on the right locations, at the right moment.
Thank you for these explanations. We now join Anthony Blue in Kourou, who met Cyril Pontoin. I'm here with Cyril Pontoin. You are Mission Director for Arianespace. How did the campaigns for the VS25 went dormant for 10 months? How did you organize Arianespace?
Well, the first question we looked into was that whether we should the satellites in Guiana when given the costs and technical constraints, it was decided to lead the satellite to the Guiana Space Center, then the checkout test equipment, electronic base, and allow the implementation of the satellites. So very quickly it was decided to return these to Toulouse as a part of the construction of the third satellite, CSO-2.
So could you give us a few examples of operations?
Well, cryostat is an example. It is a cooling device for the satellite, very sensitive equipment. And in June and in August, teams from Toulouse came to French Guiana to carry out maintenance activity of this cryostat.
10 months is a long time. Did you have to redo everything?
Absolutely. All operations resumed, notably activities related to maintenance of satellites, and some of the satellite equipment had a lifespan that had been expired, and notably the pyrotechnic devices required the opening of a solar array, and these activities, these operations kept us busy in the second part of this campaign.
It's just between Christmas and New Year for the teams also. It must have been quite complicated.
I'd like to stress the extreme commitment of the teams, both from the Guiana Space Center and the Russian teams, because this period is favorable to resting with family, but the objectives for in space was to have 2 liftoffs for Soyuz and Vega towards the end of the year, and everything went well.
And tomorrow will be also a very important day.
Yes, first day of chronology for Soyuz, and it's quite special because between transfer launch to liftoff, that's 4 days, and all activities are perfectly identified in the schedule to the very minute.
Thank you so much, Cyril. Back to Paris and the studio to follow the rest of the show. Thank you, Anthony. Well, indeed, Soyuz is still on track. You heard the DDO is like giving us the main thread. Everything is nominal. Everything is going according to plan. Soon will be the separation of Block I. It has already happened, actually. It's going so fast. And now
we have confirmation of separation of Block I. Soyuz has now done his job by injecting the frigate on a suborbital orbit.
So the nose module is the upper composite, that is frigate, with, of course, the CSO satellite hooked onto it. So Soyuz is injecting the upper composite onto a sub-orbit intermediate.
Yes, as Remy stated, the 3 stages completed its mission. A frigate is kind of considered as a payload like any other for the launcher, and will take over and will take the satellite and its operational and circular orbit. For the time being, we are on an intermediate trajectory, suborbital orbit, as Remy stated.
And in a few moments, we will see the first ignition of the frigate orbital vehicle. It will be happening on, just according to plan, it's happening right now. So the first boost or first burn, as we should say. So clarifications about this first day, this upper stage.
So pre-burn, nominal pre-burn, and that's the frigate now. It is kind of the ideal stage. It is a super light stage, and a wonton is particularly reliable and accurate, most importantly. Its capacity is to allow to take care of long, lengthy coasting phase, and it is a result of the Russian space probe to Mars, Phobos 1 and 2. And so we're talking 1988. The intermediate stage was developed in the stage itself was developed in the 90s, and with an implementation as of the years 2000. So we have confirmation of first burn of the frigate. The advantage of this frigate is its capacity to restart up to 20 times. So this capacity allows to deliver extremely versatile, complex missions With Soyuz frigate, we carried out all possible and imaginable missions. As in tonight, in low orbit and 20,000 kilometers intermediate orbit, such as Galileo, GTO launches from Guiana as well. And that was with Soyuz in 2017. Then iconic missions on a liberation orbit such as Mars and Venus Express. So yes, indeed, as Remy mentioned, his capacity to deliver lengthy coasting phase, and very important to depot constellation.
And in passing, this will be the case for the new launcher Arianespace, the new launcher to come, which will also have a restartable engine or stage. But without further ado, we join Beatrice Romero, project manager for Arianespace. She was interviewed just a few days ago.
Hello, Pierre.
So I would like to know, how did this mission unfold at Arianespace?
Mission preparation was, in fact, started, in fact, at the same time as the CSO-1 preparation, as we carried out a preliminary series of analysis covering both orbits. And we started right after CSO-1, the specific studies for the launch of this mission tonight. And we took advantage of all the experience we gained on the occasion of CSO-1 for this campaign. And now we are, in parallel to that, we are now working on the third satellite of the constellation, CSO-3, to be launched in 2022.
So CSO is the continuation of the Helios program that was launched by Arianespace. Now, in a nutshell, could you tell us why and how Arianespace developed this expertise to the benefit of both European and French institutions?
Indeed, Arianespace, since it was created in 1980, has always been of service of European institutions for the launch of military satellites, as well as scientific and governmental satellites. CSO-2 will be the 45th satellite to launch 4 French institutions, but we've launched up to 139 if we take into account the various missions for various European entities who have further missions in our order book of this type, such as Copnos Canet for the Ministry of Defense in Italy, scientific satellites such as James Webb, and we'll use biomass.
Can count on Arianespace. Thank you for all this, and we'll let you go and join your teams, and anyone will join on D-Day for the launch. Goodbye. So Beatrice is in the fishbowl right now, like many others, but before we go back to watch a film on the presentation of the mission by the flight directors, or the program directors rather. So you're joining us in Kourou, in the Jupiter Mission Control Room with Mr. Paul Aber, the CSO Project Manager for CNES, and Pierre-Emmanuel Martinez, CSO Satellite Manager for CNES as well. First of all, a question for you. What is the role of CNES on this CSO project in particular, vis-a-vis the end customer, which is DGA?
Well, CNES is the delegation of project management, which means that we take care of the full management of systems from end to end. Satellites, the ground control segment controls, as well as routing operations and maintenance in operational conditions until the end of its life, since the Helios 1A that was launched 25 years ago. CNES has developed a trusting relationship with DGA, in which we implement synergies to best respond to the needs of defense users. Major innovations were injected into all areas to meet performance requirements, and in particular increased responsiveness compared to previous generations.
And now Pierre Emmanuel Martin, the CSO satellite manager. What are the specificities of CSO-2 versus CSO-1?
Well, both satellites, CSO-1 and CSO-2, are of identical design. Only the adjustment of the focusing of the optical instruments, different and CSO-2 will place into orbit at 480 kilometers, so twice closer to the Earth than CSO-1 at 800 kilometers. Images will therefore be way higher in terms of resolutions, and so very much weighted satellites by our defense operators.
This campaign was quite special. What could you say about the way it went versus the initial CSO-1 campaign?
First of all, we benefited from the experience gained during the CSO-1 campaign, allowing us to be more efficient. Of course, nothing could protect us from the impact of pandemic. So we started with the satellite here in Guiana, and with the CNES and CG teams, we found appropriate solutions compatible with satellite requirements. The setup organizations to ensure the continuity of campaign activities while respecting health measures.
And now, for the last question, Paul Arbery, what is your own perception of this customer relationship with Arianespace?
So Arianespace has been supporting us with great loyalty for many years, particularly with the launch of CSO-1 in December 2018. A particularly demanding customer with regards to security constraints, as you can imagine, and these are particularly stringent for this type of mission. Together, we've defined suitable arrangements compatible with our requirements, and we are very satisfied with work accomplished.
So I will now let you go back to your work for the last few days before the launch, very important phase. Thank you, gentlemen, and over to you in Paris for the rest of the show. Thank you, Raphael. Let's talk about cooperation with Russia. It dates back to the 1960s.
Indeed, 1966, precisely when General de Gaulle became the first European leader to attend 2 launches on one day from Baikonur launch pads, and he was so impressed that he decided to initiate this first intergovernmental agreement for a peaceful space programs, and this led in 1996 to the creation of the Russian-European company Starsem, and with iconic missions delivered in the years 2000, which I've already mentioned, such as Mars Express and Venus Express missions. And all these success stories fed the idea of getting Soyuz to Guiana, having Soyuz and launch facilities in Guiana, with 2011 marking first year when a Soyuz lifted up from Guiana. So having a Soyuz vehicles lifting off is quite a unique example of international cooperation in space.
Clearly, so I didn't want to interrupt you, but we just witnessed the switching off.
Confirmation of extinction of the frigate.
Le frégate vient d'injecter.
The frigate has just injected itself into an elliptic or transfer orbit, and then entering a coasting phase of about 35 minutes. So within a few seconds, we'll be losing visibility from the Saint-Hubert downrange tracking station. That's absolutely normal. That's as planned, as we'll enter into an inactive
Okay, so for Soyuz launches, Arianespace can count on several launch pads. That's important.
In fact, Arianespace has access to 3 different launch pads at the CSG in French Guiana, and we carried out 25 launch on board Soyuz tonight with Baikonur. This is the historical launch pad of Soyuz with Starsem. We've carried out 28 launch up until now, and the latest one in Vostochny, and we carried out the first Starsem Arianespace launch on the 18th of December, just 11 days ago. Time flies. So we deployed 36 satellites for the benefit of the OneWeb constellation. So again, from one extreme to the other, plus 30 degrees Celsius to minus 30 degrees Celsius, depending on the launch pads.
With the gantry, which is in Vostok's east, the latest launch pad, Soyuz launch pad, they reused the ID that Arianespace had developed for its customers the same way. We have the gantry to integrate vertical.
Absolutely. absolutely. There was a good idea of the developed on the launch pad in French Guiana. The mobile gantry was to protect from weather conditions quite compelling here. 30 degrees plus 30 degrees is quite significant. And in fact, this mobile gantry idea, the Russians liked it so much that it was integrated into Vostochny's launch facilities at minus 30 degrees Celsius to protect, to improve working conditions in slightly different ways.
So right away we have a film describing the architecture of the CSO system. It's important, and the way the stations are organized, the ground tracking stations like Kourou and Kourou.
L'acquisition et la
Acquisition and distribution of CSO imagery for users mainly involve three entities. The main user center in Crail, connected to partner centers, is endowed with a direct antenna and facilities the control center in Toulouse, Apollo station in Kourou. Every user center collects and hierarchizes all the requests from defense organizations and operation units in theaters of operations. These requests are forwarded to the communication center via Crail, access portal for the CSO program. The mission center sets up the imagery scheduling for the next day, strictly abiding to international sharing protocols. It's integrated to the CSO system via the Guiana station. Every satellite executes the imagery and sends images. It depends on flying over opportunities. After processing of data in Crail, images are sent to the operating unit users. And exceptionally, the system has a capacity to amend its working plans to request to cater for urgent requests for users in various theaters of operations. And finally, the systems accommodate new European leaders ramping up the CSO program and capabilities.
Soyuz is still on track on this VS25 flight, but Remy, without further ado, let's talk about the recording of the flight data. That's the onboard memory.
Indeed, the onboard memory is key. Whilst we're discussing, we are in a telemetry hold for a period of 30 minutes. That has already started. We enter this period, so up until the moment we acquire these data, with downward range stations in New Norcia in Australia will be getting these. We want to have full data for the whole flight from the liftoff to the third burn of collision avoidance boost, and all of this information will be recorded, including this collision avoidance burn. Will download all of this data in downward tracking station, and will recuperate the entirety of the data so as to study the entire flight. Rest, it is extremely important and to gain experience and to actually know what everything that has happened, even during these telemetry holds. And these are absolutely normal, as planned.
That's the heart of your work. We go elsewhere now with a film that tells us how France will adapt to the evolution of the space, strategic challenges. You'll see Florence Parly, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Defense, and President Macron. So it's a journey into the space, national space strategy.
Space observation at the heart of military operations.
Que ce soit pour observer,
to observe, communicating, navigating, listening, these capacities are essential to the good conduct of military operations.
Alors que les menaces se
whilst threats are getting diversified and intensified, the freedom of access and use of space must be preserved to guarantee sovereignty.
À la demande du président
Request of the French President of the Republic, a new space and defense strategy has been developed in 2019 to address these challenges. The new military space doctrine, submitted by a Minister of Armed Forces, which have approved will allow to secure our defense of space and by
La ministre
space.
des Armées, Florence Parly,
And Minister of the Armed Forces, Florence Parly, detailed the strategy in July 2019. First of all, a Space Commanding Unit is created at the heart of the Air Force. And secondly, additional investments will be dedicated to the military space within RS, the program dedicated to space. And the Defense Procurement Agency has to complete the 2022-2025 military and space programs. The High Space Commanding Unit will gradually be transferred to Toulouse between now and 2025. And beyond this capacity of space defense will be ramping up so as to be fully operational by 2030. Launch of CSO-1 in December 2018 was the first milestone of this deployment of the new generation of satellites.
Depuis 2 ans,
For the past 2 years, CSO-1 has delivered quality pictures of unprecedented quality as a result of the richness of the information it contains. Both in the visible and infrared bandwidth, CSO-1 delivered many more images than previous systems thanks to its agility and its reactivity. It makes possible processing of objectives of interest. We're looking forward to CSO-2, which will allow us to further improve the precision of our analysis. With the launch of CSO-2, the system has entered a new milestone of its deployment, which will be completed with the orbiting of a third and final satellite.
Tous identiques, les 3 satellites
All 3 CSO satellites are identical. They will be placed at different altitudes depending on their missions. As part of the reconnaissance missions, the CSO-1 evolves at 800 kilometers in altitude and will be joined by CSO-3 on this orbit. CSO-2 satellite will be placed at lower altitude at 480 kilometers. It will then offer an even higher resolution for the needs of identification mission. It will allow users to determine, for instance, the presence of an element on a pickup car in a specific environment. Such a level of details is a real operational asset, and its performances makes it a unique system in Europe.
La DGA assure la conduite du
DGA is in charge of the delivery of the CSO programs. It's delegated the measurement of these programs to the CNES operating from the commanding center in Toulouse. CSO-2 launch was planned 15 months later than that of CSO-1. It's a very short time span. We checked the experience gained, and we looked at the commissioning and validated the functioning of these 2 satellite systems. All of these works have been efficiently delivered by a single team, gaining the best of their gained experience. We're ready for this launch when the pandemic started and when all operations in Guiana stopped. It came to a halt, and then we resumed operations, adapting our operations to this new health context. This was a new challenge we rose up to, and we can be very proud of that.
La DGA assure la maîtrise d'ouvrage.
DGA is in charge of the project management and delivery on ground, and operators can receive imaging from various points across mainland France, as well as from theaters of operations beyond the borders of France. The user segment allows to access Helios 2, Pléiades, as well as SAR, German system, and Cosmo-Calmed, the Italian system. Our European partners can to benefit from the CSO capabilities for bilateral agreements have already been signed with Germany and Italy. We need to be reconducted the capacity exchange principles with our new radar systems, SAR and Cosmos-Calmed second generation. Belgium too has been an historical partner. They've joined the CSO community whilst Sweden has provided a pole antenna necessary, essential for the delivery of the systems. We're continuing strengthening European cooperation in space. And over the past years, the armed forces have benefited from these strengthening of capabilities. The deployment of the system is ongoing. preparation of the Iris system successor to the MUSI CSO program has already been initiated. Space is a national significance. Space of national significance is defense strategy, as stated by President Macron, has been developed by under the aegis of the Ministry of the Armed Forces, France Paris. 3 observations there. Space is key to the functioning of our economy, our strategy, and our security. And secondly, the global space ecosystem has changed with commercial and many other projects. And then thirdly, with the increased number of threats as a result of these changing environment, the French space strategy recognizes the significance of space and aims at strengthening our space capabilities in 3 axes. First of all, renewing and strengthening our space capacity of strategic watch and support of military operations. Secondly, it's about expanding the reconnaissance capacities in space across all orbits autonomously. And final axis, as threats become a reality in space. This is about developing an active defense space capabilities, so as to defend our space capabilities within the compliance, whilst complying to international law. The CSO systems, CSO-2, satellites as launched today, will offer unprecedented high-resolution imageries and will contribute to our national strategy, will symbolize the strengthening of our capacities and renewal of our capacities, and will contribute to the beginning of the ramping up of the military space capabilities in France.
You will have understood that space has become a national security challenge, and this framework, Arianespace, has a very primordial mission. And the Arianespace mission, let's point it out, will continue beyond the separation of CSO-2.
Absolutely, separation, position, and the commercial services on the commercial phase of this mission. We'll have a 37-minute coasting phase and a short burn for collision avoidance. And as things go very fast, within 90 minutes you go around the Earth. So satellites and frigates are currently on the same orbit for these to avoid collision and so for them not to come back in phase. We ran this first boost, this short boost for collision avoidance, and we'll have an additional boost for the de-orbiting. But if this 4th boost, the-orbiting boost, fails, then we'll have secured somehow the satellite into its orbit, as we have brought down slightly the orbit of the frigate. The de-orbiting burn of the frigate will be taking place later on, and the point here is to de-orbit stage, as we are in low orbit between 0 and 2,000 kilometers. And it so happens that Arianespace, as operator, is subject to French law, the space orientation law, and it is very virtuous because it sets the framework and to not contaminate this area, by leaving debris in space. So Arianespace commits to this virtuous action to de-orbit, decluttered space, to free as much as is possible this zone. These maneuvers are essential because we don't want to leave any debris behind us, and we then participate, therefore, to sustainable use of space. It's really important. And then, as you know, and there are many debris in orbiting, notably in this low orbit. It's very much used. The market of low orbit is very dynamic with these new projects of constellations. So this is really important to be virtuous and to avoid at all costs collision risks on these altitudes. And I just wanted to very simply mention this news. At the end of November, ESA signed a contract with a ClearSpace startup, and for the purpose of launches, the first mission of demonstration. This is a global first to aiming at de-orbiting a debris, a small 100-kilo module that will move into connect into a debris so as to de-orbit this debris, and this will hopefully pave the way to a new market, decluttering, cleaning space, And the purpose of this is to continue using space for decades to come.
Let's point out that Earth observation for the satellites is a real market.
Absolutely, this is a highly dynamic market, many applications, and let's name but a few: observation of climate change, measuring things that we can't measure on land, biodiversity, monitoring species migration, and this as new digital sectors such as agriculture, not quite intuitive, not necessarily intuitive, but there's real need there for agriculture in town planning, construction, industry, and new services of first responders units at sea. We use satellites to increase the response time of those first responders.
Thank you for these clarifications. It's true, it's important that in terms of emergency, when there are earthquakes, volcano eruptions, satellites have a role to play, in particular for this type of satellite. We now travel with images, first with Brigitte Tinaldi from Airbus. CSO-2 is the 130th Airbus satellites launched by Arianespace, a long-term cooperation between the two. And with Brigitte, after that, we will see a beautiful film telling us the story of observation satellites.
Brigitte Tinaldi, bonjour.
Brigitte Tinaldi, you are the CSO satellite program manager for Airbus Defence Space. A project such as CSO-2 is a long-term project extending over 10 to 15 years. For the Airbus teams, it's a real commitment, isn't it?
It is. We are extremely proud to develop the CSO programs for the benefit of the Ministry of the Armed Forces. I'd like to extend my thanks to CNES and DGA, the Defence Procurement Agency, for their trust. Airbus has a long-standing experience of project management for Earth's observation programs with the Helios and Pléiades programs. We're delighted to continue this collaboration with CSO Airbus. What above that is in charge of this agile and avionic programs, the integration of satellites, and of the delivery of the satellites to CNES. And as for Helios, the previous program, the Helios, Airbus has been project management for the SS2, the user segments, preparing for programming quest and to recuperate corresponding data, allowing to secure sharing of information for France and its partner countries.
So developing tools of such high technicality for you, and how do you get organized at Airbus to do so?
CSO is an extremely innovative program requiring many technological developments. Such a delivery of such a program of that magnitude requires close cooperations between all institutional and industrial partners. This is the combination of teamwork that's about over 10 years worth of work for many teams in France and in Europe. Within Airbus, Toulouse-based and Paris-based teams have contributed alongside their UK and German colleagues, and then we have Thales delivering the optical instruments, and about 30 subcontractors contributed to this ambitious program. So I'd like to extend my warm thanks to all of our teams, all of our subcontractors and partners, as well as all the operational teams who delivered the launch campaign with great professionalism in an extremely complex period from a health standpoint, and all those contributed support operations during the LEOP. And all our teams have been engaged to deliver the programs with CSO-3 and in up to the future, and besides the CNES and DGA clouds.
We'll be keen to follow this. Brigitte Tinaldi, you are head of CSO satellite program for Airbus Defence and Space. Back to Paris now.
bien oui, Airbus conçoit et réalise des satellites à la pointe de la technologie. On va tout de suite passer sur l'autre industriel majeur de ce programme, à savoir Thales Alenia Space, qui lui, eh bien, il a conçu et construit
Thales Alenia Space have designed the optical purposes prime module as this project, and we join with a Skype connection, Jean Kourou of Thales Alenia Space. Over to you.
Jérôme, est-ce que vous nous entendez?
Can you hear us?
Alors, je vois votre image,
So I can see your
mais je
screen.
n'entends pas
However, I
votre
cannot
voix.
hear your voice.
On va peut-être
Perhaps
essayer de le rattraper d'une autre
we
manière.
will try to
J'attends un peu des
catch up with you
instructions.
later on. I'm waiting for instructions.
On est en train donc de
We're trying
voir
to
si on peut...
see whether we can get the connection running.
Non, Jérôme,
No,